The DLC for Tears of the Kingdom is likely coming, and I can't help but wonder what we might be getting in the future. For real, what else could they possibly add to the game when we already have this? Well, in this video, we'll take a look at some past Zelda items that are not in the game, as well as some new features that I think could be added to the game. Before we do that, let's first take a look at the timeline of events and the parts of the DLC that Nintendo released for Breath of the Wild. As many of you already know, the DLC of the Breath of the Wild was released in two parts, the first part being released on June 30th, 2017, and the second part being released on December 7th, 2017. The first part of the DLC for Breath of the Wild included the Master Mode feature, Hero's Path mode, the Travel Medallion, some new armor sets, and the Trial of the Sword challenge. The second part of the DLC included the Champion's Ballad, 9 additional armor sets, and the Ancient Bridle and Saddle. Now, Breath of the Wild was released on March 3rd, 2017, and the DLC was released to everyone by December 7th of the same year. Every piece of the DLC had been released just a little over 9 months after the release of the game, and it stands to reason that Nintendo would follow a similar timeline for the DLC that will be released for Tears of the Kingdom. I would predict that Nintendo would release all of the DLC for this game within a year after its release, which I think is really exciting. There's so much you can do in the game to keep yourself busy with it for a year, and then to have all of the DLC by the end of that first year, it's one way to really keep the game alive. With that said, it's prediction time. What can we expect to be released in the DLC? First, my guess is the DLC will be split into a minimum of 2 parts, possibly 3. I wouldn't expect them to go over 3 parts, at least not initially. For the purposes of this video, we'll keep the prediction at 2 parts. And I think Nintendo will follow a similar format as they did for Breath of the Wild. Now, I do want to add a disclaimer here. I have not beaten Tears of the Kingdom yet. I know. The game has been out for almost 3 weeks at the time of this video. I just like to take my time with it, you know? That said, I do stream this game on YouTube, and if that's something you'd be interested in watching, please slash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can catch a stream. It's good fun. Hope you stop by. Anyway, all this because I just wanted to say that some of these items may be in the game, but I haven't come across them in my playthrough or my initial research when drafting up this video. First up, Master Mode. It's essentially a lock here. We haven't received it in the base game. It's made its way into Breath of the Wild as well as older Zelda games. This here is more likely to happen than the DLC itself, if that makes sense. Hero's Path mode will probably make a comeback as well. It was a cool feature in Breath of the Wild, and it shouldn't be much harder to implement for Tears of the Kingdom. I think it would be pretty cool to see the switch between the sky, islands, depths, and surface when looking at the Hero's Path mode, or maybe that's just me nerding out again. Now onto the new stuff. We'll probably get something similar to the Trial of the Sword from Breath of the Wild. It may be related to the Master Sword and powering it up again, but if I had to guess, it would probably be something different. Personally, I hope they make more use out of the Colosseum. I'd love if we could somehow get a trial where you have to fight a round of monsters and each level gets harder and harder. Make it similar to the Trial of the Sword where you have the beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. Strip Link down to nothing but his boxers and then use the weapons provided within the Colosseum to beat the enemies. Maybe we have it similar to Call of Duty Zombies mode, where there isn't much of a break in between rounds. Monsters would keep coming until a designated round where you can cook food, sort of like a checkpoint. The reward could be powering up the Master Sword, or maybe it's related to powering up the Sage's abilities. Either way, I fully expect this first portion of the DLC to have a challenge type component to the game, similar to the Trial of the Sword for Breath of the Wild. The second part of the DLC is where we can expect a bigger adventure. In Breath of the Wild, this is where we got the Champion's Ballad. A quick recap of the adventure: we started out with a new weapon being the one-hit obliterator. We had to complete 4 shrines while being 1 sneak attack away from a keys to seeing the game over screen. No! Okay, that was close. No, not the bats! Come on! After completing the shrines, we are tasked with traveling to each of the 4 main regions to complete 3 more shrines in each of those regions, and then fighting the blight from each divine beast. Once completed, we head back to the Shrine of Resurrection to complete 1 more divine beast puzzle and take on the final boss. We are rewarded with the Master Cycle 0, a motorcycle, that's right, a motorcycle in a Legend of Zelda game. If you thought that was crazy back then, well, yeah, it no longer is. For Tears of the Kingdom, I think Nintendo follows a similar method here, and this is what I would like to see happen. Breath of the Wild focused on the stories of the past champions. Well, Tears of the Kingdom doesn't really have that. Sure, they have the stages that we could learn more about, but they didn't go into too much detail about them in the base game, so I don't think there is much reason to learn more about them. Now, the people we could learn more about are the Zonai, specifically Rauru. Now, what would be a good idea for the DLC is maybe we connect with the 4 stages of our time, being Tulin, Sidon, Yunobo, and Riju, and then go on an adventure to learn more about when Hyrule was first founded. So, for example, maybe we go with Tulin and learn more about the Tabantha region and how it was founded. Maybe we actually do learn about the past stages with cutscenes. Maybe Rauru visits them in their own towns. That would be pretty cool, right? Now, what would be really interesting is seeing Rauru visiting Gerudo Town because 1, he wouldn't be allowed to enter, but 2, Ganondorf would potentially be there. Now, these story details could be locked behind additional shrines and revamped dungeon boss battles that will be inevitably added to the game, but to top off the whole adventure would be one final dungeon that would be bigger and better than the original dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom. And then at the end would be a final boss battle with none other than Rauru himself. Now, I personally love this idea. Who else could we possibly fight here at the end as a final boss? In Breath of the Wild, we fight a monk. We've seen these monks so many times at the end of shrines. Well, what are in the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom? We have Rauru right there. Heck, throw in Sonia too, make it a tandem boss battle. And finally, we get to the reward for beating the boss. Now, I have an idea here that I think would be great for this final reward, but first, let me provide a little bit of context. As we all know, the reward for beating the DLC in Breath of the Wild is the Master Cycle Zero, a motorcycle that you can ride around the world in. By the time that you get this item, you have already pretty much beaten the game. There's really not much more you can do in the game, so it doesn't really break the game in a sense. Now, the DLC with Tears of the Kingdom, we'd be at the same part of the game, which is pretty much right before the final boss battle. So what I suggest here is an item that can be equally effective, which would be finally bringing back the hookshot to Zelda. It's been since Skyward Sword in 2011 since this item was in a mainline Zelda game. Granted, we've only had 2 since then, but this item is a classic. Heck, we can even make it a dual hookshot, where you can swing around like Spider-Man. You know, as mentioned by Eiji Aonuma back in December 2017. Now, before Tears of the Kingdom was released, I did ask the community what they thought about bringing the hookshot back into the game, and a surprising amount of people suggested not bringing it back at all because we now have the Ascend ability. I think a lot of people thought that the Ascend ability was more powerful than it actually is because you have to be at a certain spot in a certain area to make it even work. So that's why I think having a hookshot, whether it's just 1 to help climb up the side of a mountain, or having 2 so you can potentially swing around like Spider-Man, it would be a great addition and a fantastic reward for the second DLC. Either that or we can just add the spinner from Twilight Princess. So those are my predictions and thoughts on the DLC for Tears of the Kingdom. What do you think? Let me know what you would like to see in the DLC for Tears of the Kingdom in the comment section down below. Also, I'm currently live streaming my playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, and more content like this video will be coming in the near future, so slash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that content. Can't wait to see you on the next video, and thanks for watching.